Today marks the International Day of Democracy, a day commemorated to appreciate the values and practices of democracy in which election is a big part. The 17-year-long TPLF-led armed struggle, which led to the downfall of the dictatorial Derg regime, had paved the way for a democratic practice in the country. As a result, the people of Tigray as well as Ethiopia for years have been enjoying their democratic rights. Following the rise of Abiy Ahmed to power in April of 2018, with his lofty promises to democratize the nation, democracy was supposed to blossom in a constructive progress and limitations were bound to be corrected. However, the once applauded Abiy Ahmed shortly after was proved to have been hidden behind his false images, refusing to uphold the constitutional national election, claiming it would be impossible to hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tigray Electoral Commission Commissioner Mulwar Kidanumaram says it was a pretext for delaying elections.
The coronavirus pandemic was real then and it's still real. And this was one of the reasons given for the postponement. But there was no any knowledge also as to how this coronavirus could be mitigated in the next years and that election will be conducted. So they wanted to postpone this from the federal part, that is the present government. But Tigray also wanted to conduct, in spite of the fact that the coronavirus was a threat to everybody.
2 years ago this month, on September 9, 2020, Tigray held its sixth round of regional election contested by 5 parties and 3 independent candidates. The election was highly criticized by the Ethiopian government at the time, whose plan was to delay nationwide elections for up to a year, thereby making Abiy Ahmed's government stay in power unconstitutionally. Ahead of the elections in Tigray, Abiy Ahmed would go on national television hinting at the possibility of a military intervention to any elections not overseen by the National Electoral Board.
ፖለቲከኞች ስልጣን እንዲይዙ ወጣቶች ማለቅ፣ እናቶች ማልቀስ፣ ቤቶች መፍረስ፣ ህዝቦች መፈናቀል የለባቸው።
As a result of the National Electoral Board's refusal to facilitate regional elections in Tigray, Commissioner Mulwork says regional councils of Tigray felt it was necessary to set up the commission to facilitate the election, adding that the people of Tigray cannot be deprived of their rights to self-governance simply due to the National Electoral Board's refusal to facilitate the election.
The Tigray government asked the National Electoral Board to oversee the elections that well to be conducted in Tigray, because according to the constitution it was the sole responsible agency. But the National Electoral Board sided with the decisions of the federal government or the Prime Minister himself and said that they were not to oversee the election. So Tigray was to conduct an election, but the National Electoral Board was not to facilitate this. So the election rights of the people of Tigray cannot be simply hijacked by the National Electoral Board. Its function is only to facilitate and to see if elections have been going smoothly, rightly, and justly in general, transparently. So for these reasons, after its rejection, then the regional council conferred and then made a proclamation to establish the Tigray Electoral Commission.
Commissioner Mulwork said that it was of pivotal importance to hold elections at that particular time in accordance to the constitution because the people of Tigray did not want to be led by a government that was not elected by its people.
So Tigray wanted to conduct its election at that specific time in accordance with the constitution of the country. And the constitution of the country was approved as a result of the 17 years struggle, armed struggle in Tigray, and many people have died for it, and that the Tigray people have had an interest to respect the constitution. So they do want to postpone, and they do want to have a government that is not elected which simply prolongs its own authority over the public.
Although Abiy Ahmed would later rule out any possibility of a federal military intervention in his interview with EBC, calling it a village gathering that should not bother the federal government. However, not long after, war would be declared on Tigray under the disguised agenda of a law enforcement operation.
ግን ይሄን እንደ ምርጫ ማየትን ትክክል አይደለም። ምርጫ አይደለም ይሄ። ምርጫ የሚሆነው የምርጫ ቦርድ ሲመራው ብቻ ነው። ይሄ ልክ እንደ ጉባኤ ልክ እንደ እድል ስብስብ አድርገው መውሰድ ነው። አሁን በዚህ መሃል የሚደረጉ የእቁብ ወይም የእድል ስብስቦች ወይም ጉባኤዎች የኛ ቢገር ሄዴክ መሆን የለባቸው። ሄዴክ አይደለም። በእኔ በኩል ለኢትዮጵያ ውጊያ ያስፈልጋል ብዬ አላምንም። እኔ በፍጹም ውጊያ ከሚደግፉ ጎኖች ሰዎች መመደብ አልፈልግም።
Keeping quiet during this time would have led to the dismantling of the Tigray government, saying that it was not constitutional beyond the limits of its period in China. So for these reasons, Tigray opted for conducting the election. But for me, this should not have led to a total war, as we have seen it later. It was about election, and the election was to affect Tigray only. And had there been wise politicians in the country, that it wouldn't have been necessary to begin with also. That why do people go to war? Where because of election? Will you be punished because you elect your own leaders? Therefore you should have been rewarded, as far as I know in China.
In a world of democracy, where most nations represent rights through ballots rather than bullets, the people of Tigray remain under the harshest of conditions never seen in the 21st century. The people continue to be denied of their democratic rights as well as human rights. They have been besieged without any critical services such as banking, telecommunication, electricity, transportation, and the like, while most of the world stands aside and looks.